William Carter strolled 2 blocks down to Joe's Coffee on Lincoln Avenue in St. Louis, a place where the barista, a college kid named Ryan, already knew his order, a small black coffee. No sugar. He took his usual corner seat by the window, where he could watch the world move at its usual pace. William Carter liked the familiarity, the hum of conversation, the scent of roasted beans, the sound of chairs scraping against the wooden floor. He would read the newspaper front to back, fold it neatly, and head home before the Missouri heat became unbearable. It was his time, his small slice of peace. But peace is a fragile thing. As he stepped out of the cafe, coffee in one hand, newspaper tucked under his arm, he heard the low rumble of an approaching engine. A black and white squad car rolled to a slow stop a few feet ahead of him. The driver's window was down, and for a moment William Carter considered whether to keep walking. Maybe they weren't here for him. Then the doors opened. 2 officers stepped out. One was young, barely in his 20s, with a buzz cut and stiff posture. The other, older, mid-40s maybe, with the kind of build that suggested he enjoyed throwing his weight around. Neither of them looked particularly friendly. "Sir, can we see some ID?" the younger one asked. His voice flat, rehearsed. William Carter stopped, blinking at them. His heart didn't race. It didn't need to. He had been through this before too many times to count. His father had warned him about moments like these. So had his grandfather. He tilted his head slightly. "Is there a problem, officers?" The older cop shifted, a hand on his belt. "We got a call. About a suspicious person. Matching your description." William Carter glanced around. The sidewalk wasn't crowded, but there were enough people watching. A woman pushing a stroller slowed her steps. A man on a bike turned his head. William Carter let out a slow breath. Suspicious. He looked down at himself. Khaki slacks, a crisp button-up, a neatly trimmed gray beard, a newspaper, and a coffee in hand. "You sure about that?" The younger officer squared his shoulders. "We just need to check your ID, standard procedure." William Carter had 2 choices: comply and walk away, or stand his ground. He was tired of this dance, but he wasn't a fool. So he reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. But the moment his fingers brushed against the leather, the older cop stepped forward, hands on the car. His tone no longer carried the pretense of civility. William Carter froze. The street noise dulled. He could feel the shift. This wasn't just about ID anymore. But he wasn't going to let them push him around. Before William Carter could hand over his ID, the older officer grabbed his wrist, rougher than necessary. "Turn around." Hands on the car. William Carter's body stiffened. He had seen this play out before on the news, in stories passed down through generations, in moments that ended in tragedy. His chest tightened, but his voice remained even. "I'm a 72-year-old man, walking home from a coffee shop. What exactly am I being detained for?" The younger officer hesitated. His eyes flickered toward his partner. There it was, uncertainty, but the older cop doubled down. "You fit the description." He repeated it, as if that was supposed to explain everything. William Carter could feel the eyes of onlookers. A young black man with earbud had stopped mid-step, his phone held low, angled just enough to record. A middle-aged woman in scrubs lingered by her car, watching closely. Someone else he couldn't see, who was already holding up their phone. William Carter let out a slow breath, keeping his hands where they could see them. "I don't resist. I don't fight. I don't run." That's what he had told his daughter when she was younger. That's what his own father had told him. But none of that mattered. The older cop reached forward, patting him down roughly, his hands pressing into William Carter's pockets, over his chest, down his sides. William Carter clenched his jaw as a deep frustration settled in his bones. Humiliation wasn't new, but it never got easier. "You have any weapons?" the younger cop asked. Still standing slightly behind his partner, William Carter scoffed. "Do I look like I have a weapon?" He turned his head slightly, meeting the younger officer's eyes. "Do you even know why you're doing this?" The young cop shifted uncomfortably, but the older one remained firm. "Just checking. Cooperate, and you'll be on your way." A lie. William Carter had seen this. Go too far before. He thought of names, too many to count, of men who'd complied, but still ended up with knees on their necks. Or worse. He exhaled. slowly, then carefully, his pocket, and pulled out his phone. The older cop reacted instantly. Hands. Where I can see them. William Carter held the phone up, not making any sudden movements. I'm calling my daughter. The younger officer's brow furrowed. Sir, just... William Carter pressed the number he knew by heart. 1 ring, 2 rings. Then she answered. Hey, Dad, what's wrong? Her voice, sharp, focused. William Carter finally allowed himself a small breath of relief. She always knew when something wasn't right. The older cop frowned. Who's he calling? William Carter locked eyes with him. Then clearly, deliberately, he said, my daughter. The U.S. Attorney General. And just like that, everything changed. The video of the incident spread like wildfire. By the time William Carter got home, his legs were sore, but his mind? Still racing. He had been through a lot in his 72 years, but today felt different. He wasn't just another black man, stopped for no reason. This time the world had been watching, and it wasn't looking away. He eased into his favorite chair, the one near the window, where he could see the street outside. The neighborhood looked the same, but everything felt charged, like the air before a storm. He turned on the TV, and there it was, his own face, frozen, mid-walk, captured from shaky cell phone footage. Breaking news. St. Louis police stop elderly man without cause. U.S. Attorney General intervenes. The news anchors were already dissecting it. Clips of the officers, the crowd, the moment they realized who they had messed with. Panelists debated. Would the officers be fired? Would new policies be needed? Or was this just another case of racial profiling that would soon be forgotten? His phone buzzed, non-stop, messages from old friends, former students, even strangers who had somehow found his number. Some were angry. Others just wanted to tell him. They stood with him. Then the official statement from the St. Louis Police Department flashed across the screen. We are aware of an incident involving 2 officers and an individual who was detained during a routine call. The department is currently conducting an internal review to ensure that all procedures were followed correctly. We take these matters seriously and remain committed to fair and just policing. William Carter scoffed. They're trying to contain it. Dad. But it's too late. He leaned back, watching the news replay the clip from different angles. You think they'll actually do anything? A pause. Then, not willingly. That was the truth. They'd rather let the outrage burn itself out, let the news cycle move on, let another headline take its place. But this time, something felt different. The video was everywhere. It wasn't just being debated on news panels. It was being shared on social media by millions of people, young activists, celebrities, everyday folks, and who had seen too much of this and had had enough. Olivia Carter's voice softened. You okay? William Carter exhaled slowly, his fingers drumming against the arm of his chair. I'm tired, Liv. I know. They sat in silence, listening to the distant voices on the television. Then Olivia Carter spoke again. This isn't over. Glanced out the window, watching as a news van parked down the block. Reporters stepping out, cameras in hand. No, he said quietly. It's just getting started. The officers were placed on administrative leave, pending an investigation. But the public outcry was relentless. Protests erupted in St. Louis and spread to other cities. Community leaders organized town halls, demanding accountability and systemic change. Olivia Carter used her platform. She pushed for federal oversight of local police departments, mandatory body cameras, implicit bias training, and real, lasting change. Meanwhile, William Carter found himself thrust into the spotlight. He didn't seek it, but he didn't shy away from it either. He spoke at rallies, gave interviews, testified before a congressional committee. His voice calm, measured, powerful. He wasn't just a hymn, a symbol of resilience. Then came the reckoning. The younger officer, Officer Ethan Walker, resigned. In a tearful press conference, he admitted he had been wrong. He expressed regret for his actions, for his choices, for all of it. But the older officer, Robert Henshaw, fired. An internal investigation found multiple prior complaints. Still, he fought back. He filed a lawsuit, claiming wrongful termination. The court dismissed it. William Carter watched it all unfold, with a mix of satisfaction and sadness. He was glad for the accountability, but he knew this was just one battle in a much larger war, and he thought about the names, the ones who weren't as lucky as him, the ones who didn't have a daughter with the power to intervene. One evening, he sat in his favorite chair. Olivia Carter joined him. She placed a hand on his shoulder. Faintly, "We did good, Liv. But there's still a long way to go," she nodded. "Then we keep going." And they did. Together, they founded a nonprofit, educating communities, advocating for reform. William Carter became a mentor, guiding young activists, sharing his story, reminding them that change is possible, but only if they stayed vigilant. He looked out the window, at the bustling street below, and for the first time in a long time he felt it, a quiet sense of hope. The world was watching, and maybe, just maybe, it was finally ready to change.